Do you also have the feeling that our society gets more and more polarized and more to the extremes? And that it's even getting difficult to have a normal conversation like 10, 15, 20 years ago? This is one of the negative aspects of social media, because social media fosters this separation and it actually divides us as a society. The problem is the algorithms, because if you're leaning towards one side or the other, never mind the topic, your feed will provide you more and more extreme positions into the same direction. And by that you're trapped in a kind of an echo chamber that's just amplifying the opinion you already had. The consequence of that is that apps like X, Twitter, Facebook or Instagram are shaping our ways of thinking and with that our beliefs and our decisions. But the root cause of this lays actually much deeper. It lays in what Carl Jung calls the collective unconscious. Because that's what shapes our identities in offline and online communities, even that we're not aware of. In our unconscious, we have a collection of archetypes and symbols that interact in a certain hierarchy and that shape our lives. And these archetypes are getting now reflected on the roles and identities in our lives and careers. And this problem is even getting bigger with the tech dependency we have today. Because this funnels us into roles that prioritize productivity over real meaning. But there is a way how we can deal better with this situation. And today in this video, we will explore Carl Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, how it programs our path and our lives, and how we can find a way out through individuation. That means by finding our unique self amid all the disruption and all the noise. Let's get started by understanding a few key concepts what Carl Jung meant by the collective unconscious. First of all, what Jung says is that our conscious mind is actually only a very small part of our complete self. And below that there's a huge part which is the unconscious. And this has a big influence on us, but we are usually not aware of it, and it takes a lot of effort to understand that. And within the unconscious there are also two parts. One was built by our personal experience that we made throughout our lives. How we grew up in our childhood, our relationship with our parents, our friends, our teachers, but also the experiences we made in our professional lives. But there is another part that we cannot really influence. And this is something we all have in common. This is what we inherited from our ancestors and developed over thousands of years. This is like a psychological DNA that contains universal patterns and symbols and instincts that we accumulated during the human evolution. And the building blocks of this part are the archetypes. Archetypes are a kind of like symbols, like images, or like certain templates, like the hero figure. If you imagine the hero, in all cultures, in all stories, whether old or new, there's always a hero, and we all have an image of a hero. The same is true for a mother or father figure, or the dark part within us, which is our shadow. And here looks like here my shadow is coming. Say hello, Blackie. And the archetypes, while they share all some common bases, they're not like a fixed image. They're more like flexible structures. And everybody has a little bit different understanding of the archetypes. And also the hierarchy between the archetypes is different in each person. But we will find them across all cultures. Usually in art, they are expressed in music, in myth, in the dreams that we express through our images, through our paintings. And we can also see them in how cultures behave. And don't misunderstand this concept now. It's not the same like groupthink. It's more really something biological and deeply psychological. And it's not just a social construct. As I said, usually we're not aware how this collective unconscious is arranged within ourselves and how it manifests and how it influences our beliefs, because we don't understand the hierarchy between everything. Now, if we have a look on our society, there you can find these archetypes, and they're actually amplified through our institutions. For example, there's the provider archetype. This is in the past, this used to be like our father or our parents that provided us with food and with warmth and taking care of us. Today, this role is taken over to some extent by the corporations. They want you to get a stable job and that you live in security. Another archetype that is common in corporate cultures is the achiever. This is like kind of the executive, the one that is working long hours and status is very important. And it inherits let's say, the common definition of success. And now since the advent of social media, we get even more archetype profiles because we have now influencers in the web, and different persons on social media take over different archetypes, or it's usually not one archetype, it's usually like a collection or a pattern of different archetypes. And if a certain person have a similar pattern or matches our pattern, then we might find some commonality. But the problem now with these archetypes that were created by social media is not that they try to serve our best interests. Usually they're optimizing their workflows for maximum efficiency and maximum profit. So they're feeding these collective productivity norms. And that means if we're getting too much into that, we start to live the script. So we're getting part of this hierarchy. And that's why it sometimes feels strange. Let's say you're a tech director, but you cannot really identify with this role. And the reason is that it's not an individual role, that it's not reflecting your individual archetypes. It's more like a collective role. It's defined by the society what tech director means, and you adopt this definition. And then often we get in situations where these archetype definitions, so our archetype definition and the one of society, doesn't match. And that can lead to shame or even an identity crisis. Because you think you're failing according to the norms. But it's actually just a mismatch between the collective pattern and your own psychology. I was exactly in the situation. When I was working in my company, I was chasing all these titles, but I didn't understand this mismatch. I was driven by the collective success matrix, and I used all the tech tools that's supposed to help me to achieve them even fast, but it didn't bring the results, at least not the results that I wanted to have. But don't worry, there is a way to solve this situation. But before we look into the solution, let me explain you quickly a few typical archetype profiles, and let's check in, just try to understand with which one you resonate more. And as I said already, you're usually not one archetype. We're usually a collection. We have all of them in us, but some are more dominant and some are less dominant. So in our modern society, we have a few typical career archetypes. One of them is the corporate executive. That's like kind of the ambitious leader, but usually his ambition has a price in other parts of his or her life. If this archetype conflict is not resolved, this can often lead to burnout or stress. And this archetype is boosted also by social media and is portrayed by the typical boss life, the doer, the achiever. The second archetype we talked already briefly about is the reliable provider. This is coming more from a parent role or from a father-mother role. And it's usually an archetype or a person that seeks stability, that is family focused, which is good, but the negative side is also often it rejects risk. It doesn't like adventure. It likes to have things as they are, things in their known environment, not too much risk, not too much insecurity. Another archetype is the self-sacrificing professional. Now, this is the guy who's always available. They usually don't have any boundaries. Cell phone is always on, answering always directly to each email and message. And usually their shadow reveals that they're actually feeling empty. And they think they're improving their situation by even increasing their online availability, but it actually makes the situation worse. Now maybe pause the video and think for some time, what is your archetype profile? As I said, you're usually not one archetype, but which part is dominant in you? And what are parts that you may reject or don't fully integrate? And if you want to get your full business archetype profile, I recommend you jump to our website after watching this video. There you can do a test and it will tell you exactly which archetypes you are. And not only that, but also how you can use them in a positive way to improve your success. This understanding is actually key to liberation, because if you understand where certain patterns are coming from, and again, usually they're not coming from outside. We're adopting certain things, but usually we don't do them through an external force. Usually they're sitting within us. So understanding and accepting these archetypes is crucial. So if I look back on my career, I was this corporate achiever. I always wanted to achieve my goals. I always wanted to get my promotions and get more responsibility. But with each additional step I climbed up the ladder, nothing happened. I wasn't more fulfilled or I wasn't happier. It just started over and over again. And from there, I started to understand this misalignment. And that's when I actually also started to do more shadow work and to do more inner work, trying to understand myself better and to understand all the things we talked about until now. And the great thing is it's never too late to start. But you need, first of all, you need this understanding that you need to work on this integration. And this is what Jung calls the path of individuation, the path from where we are to our true self. And this is a journey. It's actually a lifelong journey. There's no clear destination. There's always something we can improve, but that's actually the key to better and a more holistic life. Jung even said, let me give you this quote here, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Okay, great. So now that you have this awareness, so how do you actually get started? And how do you actually move forward in your individuation process? So I think there are 3 different exercises or types of exercises that you can do. The first one is start with awareness. And awareness doesn't have to be meditation. It can be also just awareness in everyday situations. You can be aware when you're washing the dishes or when you go out. Just leave your phone aside and become aware of the situation. Focus on your breath. Focus on what you're doing right now. Are you washing your hands? What's happening within you and around you? The second task is actually trying to understand your unconscious. And how do you understand your unconscious? So, well, actually, our unconscious is talking with us all the time. We just usually, let's say, ignore it. And the language of the unconscious is through our dreams. So our dreams are messages that our unconscious sends us. And if you think, no, yeah, okay, but my dreams are really weird and they don't make any sense. Well, that's just because you try to approach it from a logical point of view. Because the unconscious is not rational. It's talking a lot in symbols and also in archetypes. And that's why you need to put a little effort in the interpretation of your dreams. And there's certainly tools and books that can help you with dream interpretation. But keep in mind, dreams are always reflecting your own inner story. So it's a very individual task. And yes, part of it is the symbols and the archetypes. But the other important part is your personal background. And only within this combination you can make a useful dream interpretation. A great way to get started is just write down your dreams and try to see what they're telling you. The last exercise to understand your unconscious better is it's also a Jung practice. It's called active imagination. This is basically very related to dream analysis, but the advantage here is you're trying to have a dream, but not while you're sleeping. So it's a form of meditation. You're sitting down, and what you're doing is you're inviting your inner counterparts. Let's say you're buried persons that are in your shadow that are not consciously available, but sometimes they're showing up in your dreams. So you're just sitting there, you speak out an invite, and you wait what's happening. And then eventually, after a little bit practicing, you will notice that an inner dialogue starts. And if you're curious about this work, I recommend you to download our Shadow Work Starter Kit. That's a free tool on our website that helps you interpreting your dreams. It helps you doing your dream journal, and it helps you reflecting on your active imagination sessions. So check out the link in the show notes, jump to our website and get your free version of the Shadow Work Starter Kit. And see this as your chance for empowerment. Because the other thing is also, and that's what I also wanted to show with this video, that through the collective nature of this behavioral pattern, it's not something specific for you. So there's no reason for shame or anything. It's just our heritage. We all have it in us. And the good thing is working on that and working on yourself. Once you get started, sure, in the beginning it's a little uncomfortable because you need to confront with yourself, which can be weird sometimes. But once you get started, it's an amazing experience because you start to understand parts of yourself that you didn't know that they even exist. And this work for me, it really started a freeing process because let me tell you, you always have to do the work. Like I was reading about psychology and personal development and running to leadership seminars. But the point was I never really acted on that. I never really started integrating that. And this shadow work, it's a really simple, it's not easy, but it's a simple way to start to continuously work on yourself. And the key before you can become successful is actually to resolve this conflict of all your inner identities. Because if you're just following your goals and you reach it, but they're not actually on the way you want to walk, then you will never get where you want to go. And with that, I hope I could trigger you and I could plant a seed in you that you're starting your way of individuation. And as I mentioned, the best and easiest way to get started is just download our Shadowwork Starter Kit. It's a 30-day course with exercises every day. and it will help you to make a big step forward. And with this, I want to say thank you. I appreciate that you watched the video. See you next time.